Welcome to the 31st edition of Stump the Pastor. Our question today comes from Baxter in Massachusetts. And Baxter asks, why did Martin Luther call the book of James an Epistle of Straw? Well, thanks for the question, Baxter. Some of you may remember a previous question Baxter submitted about King Solomon and porcupines. So I can always count on him to give me questions with a twist. The first thing we need to circle back to as we get into our question for today is how the Bible came to be. And we have talked about this in previous Stump the Pastor sessions, so I'm not going to repeat it all here, but let me just remind you that our current version of the Bible was put together by church leaders and influential scholars between 300 and 500 CE. So that was in the Common Era. So Jews, Protestants, and Catholics have different versions of which books belong in the Bible and what order they appear. So there are actually three versions of the Bible that are out there. Now, Martin Luther was an important reforming voice in Christianity during the 1500s. He challenged many aspects of Catholicism, which until his time had been the primary version of Christianity in Europe. And because of his critique, along with many others that would follow, Protestant Christianity began to emerge with a different voice about lots of things: sacraments, clergy requirements, baptisms, so forth. One of the things that Luther critiqued was why some of the books of the Bible were even included in the canon. And Luther particularly challenged the book of James. Luther first called the book of James an Epistle of Straw around 1522, when a German language version of the Bible was published. But James was not alone in Luther's critique. He relegated James, Hebrews, Jude, and Revelation to the end of the New Testament canonical list. Now, he did not take them out of his edition of the Newer Testament, but said these books were not as helpful in sharing the gospel message and called James and others epistles of straw. Now, the thing that might get missed by Luther's comment is that Luther would continue to preach from James. He quoted James in his writings, so Luther was not trying to get rid of James. He simply more highly favored the books of the Newer Testament that he considered to be authored by what he called real apostles. Those were the gold standard. The ones not written by apostles, in Luther's opinion, were the straw standard. So what prevented a book from being the gold standard? Well, if it didn't mention the death and resurrection of Jesus, or assert justification by faith alone, and some other ideas, then Luther said they were not as good as the other gold standard books of the Newer Testament. So although he made that decision, the book of James and other writings were included. Although he did make a joke that the book of James would make great stove kindling. So Luther was a multi-dimensional character. So for me, one of the great takeaways from how Luther looked at the Bible gives all of us an example of someone who is trying his best to be faithful and consistent to how his own faith aligned with biblical teaching, while at the same time having enough distance from the writings that he was able to critique what the books of the Bible said. This is a delicate balance to which Christians are called that holds the Bible in esteem while also having a willingness to ask tough questions. How it was written, who wrote it, what did it mean at the time it was written, and what can we take away from it for today's world? This process is called exegesis. It is something every preacher must grapple with when preaching a sermon, counseling a congregant, or making an ethical decision. One of our mottos here in the United Church of Christ is, God is still speaking. Well, it seems that Luther believed that as well. And he was a Lutheran, or at least we presume. Now, if you and I are to take the Bible seriously, then we too must be able to question it. And all of us should hold our interpretations lightly. We never know when inspiration might tickle our spirits with something new or provocative. You see, it happens to me almost every time I read a text to prepare for Sunday. And I hope it happens to you as well. See you next time on Stump the Pastor. Well, thanks for another tough question, Baxter. I hope it helped to answer what you were looking for. If any of you have more questions, please send them to me. They can be about porcupines or they can be about books of the Bible. I take them all. See you next time on Stump the Pastor.